Morning, everybody, and welcome to the California Board of Accountancy Committee on Professional Conduct. I would first like to call the roll, please.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines.
Good morning, I'm here.
Dee Dee Owens. Mark Silverman.
Here.
Yin Tu. And Nancy Corrigan.
Nancy Corrigan, present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. First agenda item today, are there any public comments for items not on the agenda? Okay, well, seeing that there are none, we'll now move to approving the minutes.
Interrupt.
Sure.
I apologize for interrupt. This is the moderator.
Sure.
I will open the Q&A for the members of the public to get the opportunity to request public comment.
My apologies.
No worries. Thank you. The moderator, members of the public, if you wish to participate in this agenda item, public comments for items not on the agenda, the instructions will be on your screen shortly. You simply click on the question mark inside of a square, which is typically located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And a text box will open. Just type in, I would like to make a comment, and make sure you send it to all panelists. Again, the instructions should be on your screen shortly here. This is the moderator. I see no request for public comments. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do. In light of that, let's move on to agenda item 2, which is approve the minutes of the November 18th, 2021 Committee on Professional Conduct meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I would be happy to make the motion to approve the minutes. This is Yin Tu.
Thank you.
This is Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines. I'll second.
Thank you very much. Rebecca Reed, call for the vote.
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens.
Yes.
Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Yin Tu. And Nancy Corrigan.
Yes.
And the motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Reed. Agenda item 3 is discussion and possible action to initiate a rulemaking to amend CCR Title 16, Sections 12 and 12.5 to consolidate the certificates of general and attest experience and eliminate the second signature requirement. Michelle Center, can we please hear from you about this?
CPC item 3 is being provided to the CBA so that it may consider taking action to amend California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 12 and 12.5 to eliminate the second signature requirement on the certificates of general accounting and attest experience forms and consolidate information into one form for each type of accounting experience requirement. Next slide. The CBA is being asked to approve the proposed language for Regulation Sections 12 and 12.5, approve the proposed certificates of experience forms, repeal the certificate of experience for private industry or government, and the certificate of attest experience for private industry or government, and direct staff to initiate the rulemaking process. At its July 2021 meeting, the CBA directed staff to work with the Department of Consumer Affairs Legal Counsel to draft proposed amendments to Regulation Sections 12 and 12.5 that would remove the second signature from the incorporated Certificate of Experience forms. For your reference, Attachment 1 contains the current regulatory language for Regulation Sections 12 and 12.5. Applications must document their experience on the appropriate Certificate of General Experience or Certificate of Attest Experience forms. Attachment 2 contains the current versions of these forms. Currently, the Certificates of General and Attest Experience forms require a second person signature verifying the applicant's experience if the applicant's direct supervisor is not the sole proprietor, partner, or shareholder of the public accounting firm, or is not the owner of the private industry or government entity. The second person signing the form must be either a licensed CPA for a public accounting firm or an individual with a higher level of responsibility in a private industry or government entity. If you turn to Attachment 3, you will find the proposed language for Regulation Sections 12 and 12.5, which eliminates the second signature requirement and enables the CBA to accept an applicant's experience form with only one supervisor signature. This will allow the CBA to more closely align with industry standards and the CPA licensure requirements of other state boards of accountancy. Additionally, this will alleviate a cumbersome process for both applicants and licensees when completing Certificate of Experience forms. Currently, there are four forms, 2 Certificates of General Experience forms and 2 Certificates of Attest Experience forms. Requiring separate experience forms will no longer be needed after eliminating the requirement for a second signature. In Attachment 4, you will find the proposed Certificates of General and Attest Experience forms. These forms consolidate the 4 forms into 2, one for each experience type. In addition to removing the second signature requirement, these forms will incorporate other technical revisions, including removing reference to outdated regulation sections and the restriction on the use of black ink when signing the forms. Next slide. At this time, staff proposed that the CPC move the staff recommendation as written in the agenda item. Next slide. I'll now turn it back over to Chair Silverman, and I'm happy to answer member questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Center. Can we open it up to discussion among the committee? Seeing that we have no comments, do we turn to public comments next?
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type "I would like to make a comment" in the text field and send it to all panelists. I do have an individual identified as Jason Fox who would like to make a comment. Jason, I will unmute you in just a moment. And I believe if committee chair can please confirm that it's a 5-minute time limit.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you so much for confirming that. Give me just a moment as I locate Jason Fox. There you go. Your microphone has been unmuted or requested to be unmuted, Mr. Fox.
Society of CPAs, I will not take 5 minutes here. We support staff's recommendation, and we supported the board's original decision when this was discussed last year. This is a prudent move in the spirit of streamlining the process and staying consistent with the licensure requirements in other states. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Any other public comments?
Yes, we have an individual identified as Pat Joyce. Pat, I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. Request has been sent.
Can you hear me? Hey, good morning, board members. Pat Joyce on behalf of the national accounting firms. Just really appreciate the staff and board recommending these proposed changes. It's a big priority for the larger firms, and really encourage you to take these up and make the changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any other ones, moderator?
No further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do.
Thank you.
Okay, turning back to the committee, is anyone desirous of making a motion to adopt the recommendations of Ms. Center and her report?
To be called on. This is Mrs. Dee Owens. I will go ahead and make the motion. I appreciate the level of detail and explanation from staff. So I will go ahead and make a motion to adopt the proposed recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Owens. Any second?
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Appreciate that. Call for the vote.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Dee Owens, Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Mr. Silverman, this is Patty. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could we please ask for public comment once more? Once the motion is made, we'll need to ask for public comment before we move on.
My apologies. Yes. Moderator, if you would call for public comment.
Moderator, members of the public, the instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click that Q&A button, type "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. Committee Chair, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do. And now we'll turn back to Ms. Reed to have the vote again, please.
all right. Carrie Ann Farrell Hines, Dee Owens,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Yen Tu, and Nancy Corrigan.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to agenda item 4, discussion and possible action to consider changes to previously proposed text and reauthorization of a regular rulemaking to amend CCR Title 16, Section 87 and Basic Requirements 88, programs which qualify 88.1, Provider Requirements 88.2, Program Measurements 89, Control and Reporting in 90, Exceptions and Extensions. Ms. Center, can we get a report from you, please?
The purpose of this agenda item is to provide an opportunity for the CPC to discuss amendments to the California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 87, 88, 88.1, 88.2, 89, and 90, and to bring a recommendation to the CBA for possible action. The board is being asked to rescind its prior approval of the regulatory text from July 2020 and approve new regulatory text. The proposed regulatory text before the committee today in Attachment 1 contains several changes compared to the text that was approved in July 2020, including Section 88G on page 5 was amended for clarity in terms of the description of blended learning programs. Section 88.2C1A on page 9 was amended for clarity regarding the licensing requirement for participants who are pre-testing self-study and adaptive self-study documentation. Sections 88.2E1B and Section 88.2E1C on page 11 were amended to reflect the pre-testing of documentation and average reading time of blended learning programs match those of self-study or adaptive learning self-study programs. In several instances, gender-specific terms such as his, her were replaced with a gender-neutral term their. Various technical formatting and grammar edits were made to ensure recently adopted regulatory language was included, the text was properly underlined and stricken, and consistency of punctuation. In addition, the most notable proposed change to the language is in Section 87A3, which addresses non-technical CE requirements. The change begins near the bottom of page 1 in Attachment 1. At the March 2021 meeting, Amber Sutter, CPA, made a public comment regarding the benefit of personal growth as a CE subject area. At the January 2022 meeting, the CBA agreed to the inclusion of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the 2022-24 CBA strategic plan. Based on these prior board discussions, staff reviewed NASBA's fields of study that qualify for continuing professional education document and found that while personal growth is not specifically referenced, diversity, equity, and inclusion is currently included as acceptable non-technical CE content in the NASBA document. Staff also noted the 2019 Fields of Study document described non-technical CE content that seemed more current than that in the CBA regulations. Therefore, staff are asking the CBA to review and approve the following subject areas as identified on pages 1 and 2 of Attachment 1 as acceptable non-technical education: behavioral ethics, business management and organization, communications and marketing, computer software and applications, personal development, personnel, human resources, and production. The proposed text includes examples of course content that may be acceptable under each of these subject areas. Additionally, the new text clarifies that non-technical CE must contribute to the professional competence of a licensee consistent with current language in Section 87A4 that disallows content that does not contribute to a licensee's professional competence. Staff do not recommend removing personal growth from Section 87A4, given it is defined in that section as content that does not contribute directly to a licensee's professional competence. CBA staff recommend approving these changes that would update California's allowable non-technical subject areas to those referenced in the Fields of Study document that many CE providers use as a guiding document when developing their CE. Further, the CBA previously discussed placing limitations on Nano learning. The CBA agreed that limitations would be placed in terms of content, specifically that ethics, fraud, and the CBA-approved regulatory review course could not be taken via the Nano learning methodology. Subsequently, a member asked that we specifically revisit the conversation of imposing a cap on the number of hours that can be obtained during a renewal period. Given that member request, we researched NASBA records and found that of the 37 jurisdictions that allow Nano learning programs, only 6 impose a cap on the number of hours that can be obtained during a renewal cycle. Additionally, the cap imposed by those 6 jurisdictions vary greatly from each other, as can be seen in your board item on page 3. Okay, you got that slide up. Okay. Staff have prepared alternative language for the CBA to consider that includes a cap on Nano learning programs. However, staff do not recommend approving the alternative language. Of specific concern would be the necessary justification for imposing such a cap and the specific rationale for whatever cap might be recommended. Staff recommend the CBA make the first motion, which rescinds the prior July 2020 motion, approves the regulatory text with the changes to non-technical CE, and directs staff to initiate the rulemaking process. This recommended motion does not impose a limitation on the number of hours a licensee could obtain through Nano learning programs. Alternative motions are included in the comments section if a different action is recommended by the committee. Motion 2 would rescind the prior July 2020 motion and approve regulatory text exclusive of the proposed changes to the non-technical education and hourly cap on Nano learning programs. Motion 3 would rescind the prior July 2020 motion and approve text that allows proposed changes to the non-technical education and imposes a CBA-determined hourly cap on Nano learning programs as outlined in Attachment 2. Should the CBA decide to make Motion 3, a rationale for the limitation would need to be provided for inclusion in the rulemaking package. While there is not a written motion in this agenda item that would approve an hourly cap on Nano learning without approving the non-technical education changes, I do have that motion written and can read it into the record if the committee elects to go in that direction. Next slide. And just to reiterate in closing, staff recommend motion number 1. I'll now turn it back over to the chair for discussion and hopefully motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sender. So as I understand what you're saying, staff's suggestion is solely approval of number 1, correct?
That would be correct. Motion number 1.
Okay. So can we first have committee discussion of Ms. Sender's report and the various issues?
Chair, this is Carrie Ann Farrell Hines. I had a question about regarding the cap on hours. So you all mentioned that there was that the cap on hours by the 6 states that you indicated, it varied, but it didn't sound like there was any, and I'm sorry I'm turning back and forth because I'm looking at multiple screens. That there was, that it varied, the number of hours between jurisdictions, but it didn't sound like there was any real rationale as to what the caps were. And while I appreciate the making sure that we did not eliminate some of those non-technical but professionally related courses, they didn't want to exclude those non-technical related courses from being included in that Nano learning. It didn't sound like there's any real correlation between the limitations, limiting the number of hours and the impact on the licensee's ability to do their job or ability to stay, abreast of the industry, professional standards and things like that. So I'm wondering if we can get some more information or feedback about whether we should limit the number of practice related or non-practice related continuing education credits that could be included. Because my concern is that you don't want to have licensees, or there should be, I feel like there's a concern about having licensees take a lot of non-practice related continuing education courses and not enough practice related continuing education courses. I know I kind of went a roundabout, but I'm uncomfortable with saying no cap, but I don't know what the cap should be. And I think that the cap, if there is a cap, it should have some correlation to what kind of impact it could have on the practice, the licensee's practice ability. And I don't have anything to go on as to what a reasonable cap would be.
Ms. Center, you want to comment on that?
Sure. Let me make a couple clarifications to see if that helps and if I'm understanding the question. So in terms of technical content and non-technical content, there already is a cap. You can only have 40 hours in your non-technical area. Okay, so when we're talking about nano learning, we're really talking about the technical content. And so when the board discussed this before, they did place limitations on the content that you can receive in CE using nano learning. And that content is ethics, fraud, and the board approved regulatory review course. Those cannot be received via a nano learning approach. That is, we believe, consistent with the standards, the statement on standards for continuing professional education document, which specifically states that nano learning program is not a substitute for a comprehensive learning program addressing complex issues. So given that, we believe that basing the decision on content that the board did in its prior decision making was appropriate. If we decide to make an additional cap, which would be on hours or, like you said, credits, however you want to say that, that would be an additional limitation. As written in attachment 2, that's an additional limitation. So it's not only content, but hours. And in addition to that, we would have to provide a justification for doing so. At this point in time, we have not found a justification for doing so. And so that is why we would ask that the committee or the board provides such a justification if that is the route that we end up going. Does that help, or was there an outstanding question? It was a long one.
No, that helps. That helps. I mean, this is a more complex issue. So no, it does help. I appreciate it. Asking the question, and this is not making a presumption. I'm asking, did staff research whether there could be a need for a cap? Because you said, staff hasn't found one. And I just want to make sure, have you not found one because you haven't looked for it yet, because we haven't asked you to look for it yet? Or have you done some research and, in looking at other jurisdictions, you haven't seen anything that would suggest that a cap would be necessary?
So we did do the research that you see in the board item on page 3 that shows the 6 states that currently have a cap. We also have really just had anecdotal conversations with experts in continuing education who, at least at this point, they don't have a concern that individuals would elect or choose to get a large amount of their CE via these nano learnings. The other thing I just want to point out that maybe isn't quite understood about the nano learning programs is they are often developed as blocks within a larger module. So an individual may not, for example, have to take 3 blocks, let's say 3 10-minute sections within a module, but they're often built out that way. So while you might see things coming in our review forms as nano learning, they might actually be part of a larger block of learning that is just being done via smaller segments. Does that help or complicate things?
No, that is very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said, it's a very technical kind of discussion, an issue. So I completely appreciate it. And thanks for letting me kind of ramble my way through to this answer. So appreciate your help.
Okay.
I do have a couple of comments. I've had my hand up and I have a couple of comments, and I echo what Ms. Hines mentioned, and that was a concern as well. And I understand 6 other states have caps, the others don't. And I do believe California needs to do what California believes is right for consumer protection, considering other states and considering UAA and all of that. Your explanation, Ms. Center, helped a bit. I understand now a little bit better that that's maybe where the nano learning would occur. And I realize that right now it's with the larger firms that are providing it. When I was on the NASBA CPE committee, we made a real effort to try to get the states really take a look, consider, and adopt nano and blended learning, that kind of thing. But at that time, and I believe even currently so, there are not many providers of nano. And nano, in that committee, we kind of labeled as just-in-time learning. So for example, me as a CPA, I have a meeting with a client next week. I need to brush up on a topic. One might be Internal Revenue Code Section 1031 exchange. Now, what were those rules? How long do I have to identify? When do I have to close? Gee, I'm a little fuzzy. And I find a legitimate nano course that is certified, that's within all of our programs and that sort of thing. And I can get that credit as long as there's a minimum of 10 minutes and no more than 20 minutes. But I would never recommend that an accountant, auditor type, go and try to learn all about auditing cash, receivables, everything on the balance sheet, the P&L, and everything else, because as you mentioned, it's not a substitute for a comprehensive learning program addressing complex issues. I would hope, it seems impractical that an accountant would go and try to get all their CPE this way, very impractical. And in the regional meetings, the biggest concern was kind of the paperwork load of trying to audit all of that. So I didn't want to just hang my hat though on what's practical and what isn't. It scares me a little bit to do that. I'm a little bit more leaning toward the cap, unless I can be convinced. I mean, your comments today helped me with it, but that's my concern. If somebody could just sit around and do a bunch of nano learning, and do they really have continuous, comprehensive learning? I think not. That's why we're saying not include ethics, don't include certain things, because we can't accomplish that. And I just kind of another comment. I know in early 2023, staff will be reviewing CPE, and that's in your materials here. And that will be from the standpoint of what course makeup, course inclusion, including newer, with the CPA evolution, including some of that. What will that consist of? And if we make a decision today and recommend to the board something about nano, would we be possibly undoing anything in early 2023? Would we rather wait? That's my question.
Chair, if you don't mind, I'll respond. Thank you, Ms. Corrigan. So let me start at the very beginning, if you don't mind, of your comment. You are correct. It is often point in time. So So imagine, for example, a CE provider might decide to do a bundle of learning on, let's say, new tax law that came into effect in a specific year. They might break that up into specific sections that are shorter, right? That are going into effect that year instead of covering them all in one comprehensive package, so that if you are, needing to just really understand one of those, you could, but you could also take that full module consisting of multiple Nano learning content. So that's that. You are also correct that in California, and we may have a public comment from a member of Cal CPA, but Cal CPA is one of our providers of continuing education. And I think it is really waiting to kind of hear the direction that the board goes before it, finalizes its approach on Nano learning. But I expect that it will also be a provider, and that's in comment to, there aren't that many providers yet. So that's in comment to that. In terms of kind of the larger picture on continuing education and re-looking at these regulations starting next year, I believe that the regulations have developed over time, and when that happens, often they get confusing, a little disorganized as you add new content over time and try and fit those in, and then you fit them in again. And so one is trying to add clarity to these regulations by a reorganization. Another goal that I have when we look at the larger picture is for us to be able to be more timely in our response to new innovative CE approaches. Right now, we are so specific in some areas that it is very hard for us to be timely. Nano and blended is a really good example that technology has been around for blended learning, for example, the use of artificial intelligence in continuing education. These truly are not new things, these adaptive types of technology, but it takes us a while using regulations to get those implemented. So looking for an approach that would allow us to be more responsive and timely to new technologies, approaches to continuing education. So the question is, would we undo it? Not necessarily. In other words, you could decide today you want to put a cap and you're very strong on that cap and we continue with it. You could decide today, let's not do a cap, let's kind of see what happens and see if we are concerned when we revisit these. If we're concerned, we can do the cap then. That would be another approach. So the answer to that is not necessarily, if that's helpful. I hope I answered all your questions, Ms. Corrigan.
Thank you. And it's kind of lots of questions involved, here, and it is complex as far as that discussion. But the thing is, we're in March. By the time we get to early 2023, and I don't know how far along Nano course availability will be, I suppose we can reevaluate that at any time. So it's just a comment, and just wanting other committee members to understand, or maybe to hear what I have to say, whether that has any impact. So that was my concern, but thank you.
Any other comments from members?
This is.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Mine's just a very tactical question. Does the Nano learning, I don't believe I specifically have taken any, does it have anything to kind of validate understanding? Because my concern could be is, as a CPA, someone takes all of their ANA credit as, Nano learning. Is there anything in the Nano learning that tests comprehension like another type of modality for training would?
Ms. Center?
Yeah, sorry. I mute myself just in case, and then I don't know why it's so hard to find that button after you do it. It does. I would have to find the specific section. I think I found it, but it's always nice to make sure. So Nano learning programs, which are described on the bottom of page 4 of the proposed text. On that, you will see that the licensee received a 100% score on a test given to the participants prior to issuance of the credit. And that particular statement is on the top of page 5, though Nano learning starts on the bottom of 4.
Thank you.
Chair, Nancy Corrigan here. So yes, I mean, Nano learning is like any other CPE that is from a approved provider, sponsor, whatever they're called. And yes, there has to be evidence of having taken it, having been tested. So I don't just sit down at my computer and go, gee, I better look into that section 1031 exchange. I'm going to just look it up. No, that doesn't count. I have to take it from a valid provider, and then I'm tested in those few minutes of time, and then I receive a certificate. When I renew, I can submit it to the CBA to show that I did it and that I accomplished it. But your question about what if somebody takes all of your A&A would scare me, because again, it's meant for specific topics. That's the part that scares me, is me learning all about auditing. I'm not getting comprehensive training and learning and understanding like I would at a webinar or an interactive self-study that's going to cover the whole thing for, say, 8 hours or 16 hours. This is a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 20 minutes. So I hope that helps.
Any other comments from members? Ms. Bowers, do we go to public comments before I ask for the board to consider and take possible action?
Or the motion out first and then take public comment afterwards.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. So, in light of these very substantial and thoughtful questions from Ms. Corrigan and Ms. Hines, does anyone on the board want to make a motion or express some opinion about something short of a motion and for further consideration?
This is Carrie Ann. Unless Ms. Corrigan has a alternative motion to suggest, I would suggest motion number 1. The CBA directs staff to initiate the process and all of the details that are included in the motion. Except that I would include the deferring discussion regarding the cap on the hours to 2023. So word the motion so that it includes that language. Should I read the whole motion as I think it should be supplied, or are we sufficient with the materials that are presented?
I'm sorry, I really couldn't hear the entire motion, Carrie Ann, maybe because you were looking at different screens. Could you?
Okay.
Like me to help, Ms. Hines?
Yes, please.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the proposal is motion number 1 with one addition to the motion, which is to direct staff to revisit imposing an hourly cap on Nano learning when it brings back proposed regulatory text in 2023.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I believe we have a cogent motion. Do we have a second?
Chair, I will second that. Nancy Corrigan, thank you.
Okay, now do we turn it over to public comment, Ms. Bowers?
Yes, Mr. Silverman, correct.
Okay, moderator, please.
Yes, this is the moderator. Members of the public, the instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate in public comment for this agenda item, click on the question mark inside of the square, typically located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. So I do have individual identified as Jason Fox who would like to make a comment. Jason, I'm going to unmute or send a request to unmute your microphone in just a moment. Request has been sent and you have a 5-minute limit.
Hi, Jason Fox with the California Society of CPAs. We would support motion 1 or the motion on the table with the addition there. This is a long process to kind of update the CPE regulations to include some of these new flexible learning platforms with Nano and Blended, and certainly support the broader non-technical definitions that are included in the amendment. I do think this is in the spirit of flexibility and, some level of professional discretion for the CPA to take the courses that they need in the manner that fits them. Certainly looking forward to working with the staff, as we kind of take a step back and revisit the whole CPE regs and clean up and make things more streamlined and consistent. But I do think there's value in allowing the Nano and Blended platforms and then kind of seeing where those go and making some adjustments if appropriate down the road. So, in closing, I would just recognize the staff in their very diligent way of kind of blending things together. The CPE regs are a little bit of a Frankenstein, but I think this is a very smart way to approach it. So we fully support the motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
This is the moderator. No further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do.
Thanks.
Would you like me to call for the vote now, Mr. Silverman?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Reed.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens, Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Yen Tu,
Yes.
and Nancy Corrigan. The motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Reed, and thanks to all of you on that. Agenda item 5 is discussion and possible action regarding petition hearings associated with consideration of a reinstatement of a voluntary surrendered license. Mr. Franzella.
Thank you, Mr. Silverman. Good morning, members. I am Dominic Franzella, Chief of Enforcement. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the CBA with an opportunity to discuss a possible modification of the procedures for reinstatement of a voluntarily surrendered CPA license. The CBA is being asked to adopt a modification to its procedures for handling reinstatements for individuals who have voluntarily surrendered their CPA license. Additionally, the CBA is being asked to direct staff to work with DCA legal counsel to develop possible regulations around the modified procedure if adopted by the CBA. So while it is a common occurrence that individuals may surrender their license as a result of disciplinary proceedings, the ability for an individual to simply voluntarily surrender their license because they no longer wish to practice or hold out as a CPA has been something that's more relatively new and has been around since about 2004. Should someone, a member of the public, look up these individuals on license lookup or using the license lookup feature, both groups, whether or not it was a surrender for voluntary purposes or for a disciplinary matter, will show up as surrendered. However, the disciplinary related matter, the area related to disciplinary action, will have a yes in that particular field and a link to the various documents on the board's websites. So for individuals seeking to reinstate a license and whether or not the surrender was the result of disciplinary action or voluntary in nature, the Accountancy Act requires the individual to petition the CBA for the reinstatement of that license. And on your materials on this agenda item in the middle of page 2, staff have highlighted the process that the board uses when considering a petition presently. So staff are proposing the CBA consider a slight modification to the process used when the petitioner is solely seeking reinstatement of a voluntarily surrendered license that was not the result of discipline. On the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3, staff have highlighted these modifications, which would be that the petitioner would submit a written request for petition application. Once staff receive that, staff will schedule the petition for the CBA meeting and for a CBA meeting and provide the Office of the Attorney General notice and an opportunity to submit written arguments for the CBA to consider. Staff will compile these written materials and include it in the CBA meeting materials. And the CBA will convene into closed session to discuss the petition and will direct DCA legal counsel to prepare a written decision. However, if during the deliberations, the CBA votes to require oral arguments, staff will schedule such arguments for a future meeting. Some of the benefits to the modification would be a reduction in cost. The CBA pays to OAH, or the Office of Administrative Hearing, for the administrative law judge and the court reporter. Would increase efficiency associated with not attending or with not needing to conduct the hearing in a virtual setting. As members have experienced, a number of these particular petition hearings are rather challenging in a virtual environment. And for these types of limited circumstances, it seems appropriate. And it would also reduce costs for the petitioner when and if the CBA returns to in-person meetings, as the petitioner would not need to travel to the CBA meeting. As these types of petitions generally revolve around whether the individual has completed continuing education, demonstrating fitness to practice, and there's not a disciplinary issue or underlying matter for the board to consider. It's a pretty focused petition process, and the board actually just experienced this at the last meeting, where it was really just a petition packet that included continuing education and ensuring that that individual had met those requirements prior to the board rendering a decision to reinstate that individual's license. So while the CBA maintains significant discretion regarding how it conducts its petition hearing in accordance with the Accountancy Act, given this would be, if the board adopts this modification, would become a standard practice if implemented, staff believe creating a regulation would be appropriate to memorialize the procedures. And in discussion with DCA legal counsel, it was noted that during the development of the regulation, the CBA could implement and use the staff proposed modifications in the interim. So staff recommend the CBA adopt the proposed modification to its procedures for handling these limited reinstatements for individuals who have voluntarily surrendered their license that is not a result of a disciplinary action. And additionally, staff recommend the CBA direct staff to work with DCA counsel to develop possible regulations around the modified procedures if these are adopted by the board. At this point, I would like to turn this item back over to Mr. Silverman, and I will do my best to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Franzella. Committee members, any questions or opinions?
This is Carrie Ann. It seems like this is very similar to other professional licenses, that it shouldn't feel like a punishment if a licensee wants to, step back from actively practicing, but they don't want to have, this sort of mark on their professional record that may suggest that there's something untoward about them stepping away. So I think this is a good idea. And unless there's other comments, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the staff's recommendation that's included.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Any second to Ms. Hines' motion?
Motion.
Can we now turn it over for public comment?
Mr. Silverman, I see Ms. Tu has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, so normally this is a voluntary procedure in terms of surrendering. So is it considered surrendering their license, or is it do license lapse? Just for my own edification.
So in this particular instance, it is a surrender of the license. It's just being done outside. It's not in conjunction or as the result of enforcement actions. This has become less of an issue since I want to say in or around 2014. I believe that's when the board's retired status option took effect. Because prior to that, this whole issue of individuals who were seeking to kind of stop practicing, they didn't want to show as inactive and continue to pay a fee to do so. But then as a result, they didn't want to go delinquent or expired delinquent and then canceled because they thought it had a very negative connotation to it. The voluntary surrender process became an option that the board allowed for to accept. So it is still a surrender. It just isn't associated with discipline.
Any other board comments? Can we now turn to public comments?
I've opened up the Q&A feature. Members of the public, the instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, typically located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And in the text field, type, I would like to make a comment, and send that to all panelists. Committee Chair, I see no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Reed, can we call for the vote?
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines. Dee Owens.
Yes.
Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Yen Tu. Nancy Corrigan.
Yes.
And the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. The last item on the agenda is agenda items for the next or future meetings. First, to the members of the board, do you have any? Seeing that there are none, could we see if the public has any? Moderator?
Members of the public, the instructions will be on the screen, or they are on the screen at the time. If you would like to participate, click on that question mark inside of a square, type, I would like to make a comment, and send it to all panelists. Committee Chair, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
That includes the agenda items for the CPC committee. Unless there are any other comments, this meeting is adjourned.
And this is the moderator. The legislative committee meeting will start at 10:30. I will put up a slide. So legislative committee meeting, 10:30 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corno.